According to an article by the Wall Street Journal, Europeans are becoming poorer. This has sparked debates and raised a lot of eyebrows. But what's really stirring the pot is the intriguing comparison to the land of opportunity, the United States, where the standards of living seems to tower over Europe like an economic titan. Europe is the world's third largest economy in nominal terms, trailing only behind the United States and China. Yet, beneath this facade of economic prowess, the EU is facing some turbulent times, with recent events like the pandemic and the Ukraine-Russia conflict adding to the complexities. On the surface, it might seem like the European job market is thriving, boasting record-high employment rates and a declining overall unemployment rate, but a harsh reality lingers. Families all over the continent are playing a game of financial Tetris, trying to make inadequate wages fit the bill, and a migration crisis is worsening situations. In this short video, we'll be taking a quick glance at some of these economic woes, exploring the challenges that European nations are grappling with, and the looming question, are Europeans really becoming poorer? Before we dive into the chapters of this video, comment below with your thoughts too about Europe and your experiences with some facts. The economic landscape on the global stage has seen some significant shifts, and let's just say the US economy is stealing some of the limelight. Back in 2008, the EU and US economies were pretty much on the same level, like two contenders in a friendly competition. The EU's economy was slightly ahead at $16.2 trillion, with the US at $14.7 trillion. But since the global financial crisis, their economic paths have gone in dramatically different directions. By 2022, the US economy had taken the express elevator, growing to $25 trillion, while the EU and the UK were stuck waiting for the stairs, only managing to reach $19.8 trillion together. One factor behind this economic struggle is the enduring legacy of austerity. Following the 2008 global financial crisis, European governments decided to tighten their belts, implementing extensive austerity measures. They cut back on public expenditure when private spending was already on a decline. The consequence of all this belt tightening? European businesses were hesitant to invest in producing stuff because they knew consumers wouldn't have the money to buy it. This post-2008 austerity wasn't just a roadblock. It was a road paved with quicksand, slaying continent-wide investment, then pushing Europe onto a path of secular decline. During the pandemic, Europe's austerity drive took a temporary break as fiscal rules were suspended, and a recovery fund was introduced. It sounded promising, but it didn't quite live up to the hype. The response was different from that of the United States, as Europe focused more on supporting businesses than directly aiding citizens. Today, the Eurozone features lower levels of public investment as a percentage of aggregate income than any other advanced economy or economic bloc. The European Union is experiencing a noticeable decline in its population. Demographic projections are painting a clear picture, indicating that the EU is headed for a significant reduction in its population by the end of the 21st century. The declining population comes hand in hand with an aging population, with a preference for savoring life's fine wine and job security over a relentless chase for earnings, and this has led to years of lackluster economic and productivity growth. According to a report on demographic change by the European Commission, the EU's population, which was slightly over 448 million people earlier this year, is projected to reach its peak around 2026, and then gradually decrease, losing 57.4 million working-age people by 2100. The bloc's dependency ratio, which is the ratio of the number of elderly people compared to the number of people of working age, is set to surge from 33% to 60% by the end of the century. This drastic shift in the demographic pyramid will have ripple effects on the labor market like a domino effect, causing widespread shortages that could hinder growth, productivity, and innovation rates. And ultimately, this could accelerate the loss of competitiveness when compared to other major economies. The productivity rate in Europe is experiencing a slowdown, and it's not just a slight deceleration. It's like the European economy is hitting the brakes, both in absolute terms and when compared to the productivity rate in the United States. Even the top 5% of the most productive companies in Europe are experiencing a slowdown in their productivity growth rates. Now, let's talk about numbers. In the United States, the gross domestic product per person is nearly $70,000. But in Europe, only a few countries like Luxembourg, Switzerland, Norway, and Ireland have similar figures due to corporate tax havens. Germany, the European economic powerhouse, has a per capita GDP of around $58,000, which is comparable to Vermont but falls behind New York and California, which are at $93,000 and $86,000 respectively. But if you think that's a tough comparison, it gets even more challenging for other European countries. In the UK and France, incomes are on par with those in Mississippi, the poorest state in America, where per capita GDP is around $42,000. In 2023, the purchasing power situation of Europeans is of major concern. Private consumption has declined by about 1% in the 20-nation Eurozone since the end of cooperation and development. The European Union's slice of the global consumption spending pie has reduced to about 18%, while America's share has grown to 28%. 15 years ago, the EU and the US each represented about a quarter of that total. There's a collective sigh of frustration echoing across the continent as more than 1 in 2 Europeans surveyed say that their purchasing power has declined over the last 3 years, 55%. This situation is particularly acute in countries like Greece, 64%, Serbia, 63%, and France, 60%. The cause is clear. Of those experiencing a decline in purchasing power, 89% point the finger at rising prices. Now, in the midst of these financial storms, nearly a third of Europeans, roughly 29%, say they find themselves in precarious financial and material situations, with sharp price rises since the start of 2022 acting as the backdrop of financial struggle for many Europeans. The persistently high inflation rate is like a pressure cooker that's making it increasingly difficult for household incomes to keep up with rising costs, and this has taken a toll on the purchasing power of families across Europe. The impact of this income squeeze isn't one size fits all. Different income groups have different spending patterns. As reported by the ONS, poorer households typically allocate a larger share of their income to energy and food. As a result, they've felt the sting of inflation more than others, especially with energy and food prices on the rise. In addition, companies have been reluctant to adjust wages to keep up with the relentless onslaught of the cost of living. The result? The per capita income of families has taken a hit, and this is where it gets darker, especially for those lower-income households. In just 1 year, the number of families dealing with financial stress has spiked by 13%. Minimum wage adjustments are like the occasional treasure chests that pop up on the quest. They're periodic, and when they finally arrive, it feels like a short-lived victory because price increases are continuous. So, until the next rise in the minimum wage, the purchasing power erodes further. Measuring innovation's impact on an economy is like trying to catch a fleeting breeze. We often rely on a key factor, which is company spending on research and development, or R&D. Europe set a bold goal back in 2002, aiming for 3% of its GDP to be allocated to R&D spending. This goal was reaffirmed in the EU's 2020 strategy, but not much progress has been made since then. However, innovation spending isn't confined to R&D alone. It also includes how companies adopt innovations. The concerning part is that the number of companies involved in innovative activities is on a downward spiral. If we examine the data from 2015, we see a rather lopsided distribution. The top 10% of the largest companies are responsible for 77% of total R&D spending. And if we narrow it down further, the top 1% of companies alone account for nearly 1/3 of all R&D spending in Europe. The limited investments in innovation have consequences, and one of them is that European champions find it challenging to establish a strong international presence. These issues and many others paint a complex picture of the economic landscape in Europe. It's clear that Europe is facing its own share of challenges, and there is a need for innovative solutions to turn the tide. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and comment for more thought-provoking content.